Okay, I've got limited space, which is very irritating, but I'll just try to get straight to the point. I want to talk specifically here. I've touched on this subject before, but I want to be specific about Westerners who basically serve as apologists for um, totalitarian foreign regimes. I'm particularly thinking of those in Russia and China. Now, the reason I want to focus on Westerners is because, or let's say a Chinese or Russian national, there are obvious nationalistic sentiments there, a kind of natural tendency to defend one's homeland. So, whilst I'm not going to agree with them, I understand where it's coming from. I mean, if I was Chinese, I would probably have a knee jerk reaction as well. I'd probably have jingoistic sentiments as well, because that is the sort of education system that goes on there. You know, from a very early age, people are basically told to love the party and love the motherland and attack anyone who says otherwise, verbally. You know, it's very much, I've seen it directly, it's very much pumped into the national psyche. And in the case of Russia, you have a thug regime run by Putin that has huge control over the media. It's a gangster state, really. Now, everything I'm saying here is nothing against China and Russia as cultures, as countries rather. There may be some cultural aspects in it, but certainly the saving face thing is a big cultural thing in China. But the point I'm driving at is I can understand why a Russian Putin supporter or a Chinese nationalist might have the views they have. I'm still going to robustly disagree with them, probably dislike them even in some cases, but that's kind of to be expected. What I find hard to accept is Westerners who serve as useful apologists for these regimes. You don't have to love the British or American government to simply see what is wrong, or, it's not a case of you have to support one to attack the other. So, for example, I have no issue with people who really dislike our government here in the UK or the Trump administration. I dislike the Trump administration. I'm not talking about, oh, you need to be flag waving and, have that sort of Cold War mentality. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people who not only actively will criticize Western governments, but they actively go out of their way to defend the totalitarianism of Beijing and Moscow. I find that frankly, I find it repugnant. Because as someone who has lived and worked in China, I know what the nature of the regime is. That's no reflection on my experience in terms of how I was treated. I found people to be very hospitable, and I, for the most part, had a good time. But I did see the nature of the regime at play there. And I've spent years literally researching and looking into this. And it is a phenomenon that I've noticed after Salisbury. There were a lot of useful apologists for Putin. Now, these people aren't necessarily communist, but what I find, well, they're not always communists. What you often find is the people who are most likely to defend the Putin regime in the Western sense are either far left in some cases, but also far right, because they both have this thing against the globalists, you know, and they tend to be really keen on pushing conspiracy theories. I mean, if you look at RT, it's based on conspiracy theories. What constitutes their reports are basically conspiracy theories. And this is a very powerful force. This is why it makes me uncomfortable and it makes me angry, because what we are seeing at play here, some very, very powerful underhand tactics going on with Beijing and Moscow. You know, these people will often say, oh, the CIA backed coup, and so on, like the protests in Hong Kong. And they cannot grasp that actually maybe there is real animosity among the protesters to Beijing, because they do not want to be another clone. They do not want to be just another Chinese city controlled by communism. This is not to say that the CIA doesn't have a murky history. Of course it does. I'm well aware of that. I'm well aware of the CIA's history of covert operations. But again, even let me play the devil's advocate for a second. Even if it was a CIA-backed coup, that doesn't legitimize China's position and role. Um, I just find it grotesque and hypocritical that people who live in free societies, that is, societies where you can freely criticize the government in power, would have the audacity to defend totalitarian states. So someone living in Germany or Canada or the United States or Britain defending the Xi regime in China, I really have to ask, what is wrong with you? As whatever flaws democracy has, and there are many, whatever shortcomings, whatever flaws you can find, ultimately, nothing will give validity to an argument that says a totalitarian system is superior to a system where you can freely dissent. There is no, you can say whatever you like, nothing will justify that. I've heard people try to justify Chinese communist totalitarianism because it's a fast growing economy, although that's a bit iffy at the moment. It's got gleaming skyscrapers, and yes, a lot of people have been lifted out of poverty. And that may be what the average Chinese person wants in the short term. But at some point, it is basic human nature to oppose that sort of control. And I think there are actually a lot of things going on in China that the regime wants covered up. They can't really do that with Hong Kong, but I think there is actually a lot of discontent growing in China, but they just show the positive side. So, for example, when they showed the 1st of October celebrations, they showed all the flag-waving crowds, and that was there. That's a real thing. It's a real phenomenon. But it doesn't show the huge discontent, not necessarily over human rights issues, but over issues like, although human rights comes into it, issues like state developers moving in and forcibly building new developments on old cemeteries. Ancestor worship is a big part of Chinese culture. Things like that you never hear about because the Chinese state media covers it up. Now, fundamentally, the Chinese regime is cowardly because they cannot handle criticism. They're very, very thin-skinned. This is a regime that is scared of Winnie the Pooh because internet users have mockingly said, the Winnie the Pooh character looks like Xi Jinping. Now, this indicates to me that actually a lack of confidence. On one hand, yes, China's a powerful country, but that indicates to me a lack of confidence. RT, again, that doesn't show Russian assertiveness. It shows Russian paranoia because they feel the need to rely on conspiracy theories to try and defame the West. So you'll look at RT reports, it's entirely negative, very, very negative. Any coverage of the West is always focusing on protests or unrest and how awful Western governments are. RT will never, ever, ever cover protests in Moscow. This is characteristic of totalitarian states. So I think the people who are defending these regimes are clinging on to failed ideologies. Now, Putin isn't a communist, but he does aspire, I believe, to get the sort of power that the Soviet Union had. I think there is a bitterness in Russia's ideology today, Putin's ideology, and it's kind of a resentment. The West won the Cold War, so we need to reclaim Russian glory. I understand it. Russia and China are great countries. They are. They've contributed a massive amount to human civilization and culture. But those Westerners who go from respecting the culture to being apologists for those regimes, I find it utterly pathetic. I have no respect for them, and I'm not going to pretend to be neutral on this. I'm not neutral. I hate communism, and I hate all totalitarian systems, whether they be communist or fascist or absolute monarchy or whatever they are. Theocracy, I oppose them. So, I don't think you can actually find a middle ground with these people because they are living in a fantasy land. They are living in an ideological platform, an ideological model that has failed. There's only 4 or 5 communist countries left in the world today, and China is actually a hybrid system. It's actually the ugliest aspect of communism with crony capitalism as well. So it's a very ugly system. Um, and I don't care how many gleaming skyscrapers there are. I mean, look at the Gulf states. They're super rich, but the human rights record is appalling. So wealth in itself should not be a barometer of human progress. You know, I would rather live in a middle income country which has freedom of dissent rather than a super rich state where you can't dissent. But you know, these Western apologists, I really wish they would put their money where their mouth is and move to China or Russia because they have the right to talk nonsense. They have that right. I cannot say, you know, take that away from them. But putting up with their or listening to their hypocrisy gets rather tiresome. You know, I really do wonder what goes on in their minds to have this sort of attitude whereby they would say with a straight face that the Chinese communist system is superior to a system where you can freely dissent. Democracy can be messy, democracy can be chaotic, but it will always, always trump a totalitarian system. So I'm not going to pretend I have any respect for those people. They have the right to be useful idiots. They have the right to serve as apologists for Xi and Putin, but they're making fools of themselves when they try to make arguments in favour of those regimes. Because what they always come back to is, oh, CIA plots, conspiracy theories, and they'll revert to the RT narrative. And it's pathetic, in my opinion. It's perfect. I'll close with this. It's perfectly compatible to dislike the American administration and to acknowledge the role that the CIA has played in covert operations or MI5, whilst also acknowledging that those are totalitarian states that shouldn't be replicated. You know, it's not a case of if you're anti-communism, then you have to love the CIA or something. It's this dual mentality of thinking that makes these people so stupid and so um, difficult to kind of reason with. But I have no respect for people who, I'm not going to pretend I'm going to be polite about this or put etiquette before truth. Truth is the only thing that matters. And these people don't care about the truth, or they willingly ignore the truth, just like the Chinese Communist Party, which has been doing it for 70 years.